There's one more organization which I'm part of. There, usually what happens is after 30, they retire you. So that is one more organization which has made me feel old. Jokes apart, my name is Abdul Quddus Suhaib. I would actually call myself as an environmental enthusiast who's been working in the field of environment for almost 5 years. So nothing more than that. It's just those experiences over the 5 years which I have, which I would want to present in front of you. And the topic which I have in front of me is climate change. What can we do? There is a caveat which I want to put forward, and then I would begin my talk. Is that whenever we talk about climate change, the biggest problem which people have, or the people who want to talk about climate change have, is that the whole language of climate change is bound in the scientific jargon. So how do you break that barrier, and how do you take it to the people is something which is challenging and which people have been writing about. And Amitav Ghosh, he's written a lot on environment. He in his book, this book, very famous book, I would actually recommend each one of you to read about it. The name of the book is The Great Derangement. So he says one of the biggest problems of climate change is the lack of language, or the crisis of language. How do you break this barrier of scientific jargon, and how do you actually convey it to the people? There's one more movie, probably most of you have seen that, by Leonardo DiCaprio, Don't Look Up. That actually perfectly sums up what is happening in the whole domain of climate change. That we know that this is something which is imminent, which is happening right now. This is not something for the future generations we are doing. This is something which we are all facing, and yet we are actually involved in so many trivial things, trivial matters of life. So this is one challenge which I have, which probably I don't know if I'll be able to convey it properly. But there is one hope for me as well. That is, the timing in India is 4 o'clock. I know this is a time when people sleep. So if at all people are sleeping during the lecture, it is not because of me. It is because of how people have been habituated, right? Okay. So I'll go ahead and basically I'll talk in 4 sections, right? First, I'll try to talk about what exactly is climate change. How do you look at it? And what are the impacts of climate change in the second section, and in the third section of how do you actually solve this crisis of climate change, or how do you start intervening in climate change, in the whole discourse of climate change. And finally, what is the cause of this? So these are the 4 sections which I'll try to cover in the stipulated time. If at all I won't be able to do it, I'll be skipping the last section. I'll be talking about the first 3 sections, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll try to, again, break the barrier of scientific jargon, at least not in the first section, at least in the later section, and try to convey to you what exactly does climate change mean. Afzal bhai, it's very scary, especially this 2-dimensional screen which I have. Am I audible? Are people listening?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, thank you. अच्छा बीच में आप बताते रहिए ना कि अच्छा हाँ ठीक है right.
Yeah.
Somebody can do it. Yeah. If somebody can do it, no. At least this thumbs up or some questions will actually help me navigate through this session.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the first thing, see, I want everybody to participate in this, right? This exercise which I want everyone to do, right? What I want you people is to imagine a couple of things which I've actually put across on the screen, right? I want you all to close your eyes for a moment and imagine imagine a world in which we are living, where around 2.2 billion people in the world do not have access to clean drinking water. Imagine a world like that. Do you really want to live in that world? Or if at all you are actually living in that world, what kind of a chaotic situation will it be, right? Imagine in the country in which we are living in India, imagine if in every 3 minutes, there is a child dying in India because of some form of toxic air, some form of pollutant. Imagine it. Imagine. This is very important, all right? Because Amitav Ghosh also talks about this. Okay, how do you humanize what is happening uh, in the world, right? Let us try to humanize this discourse of climate change. And I want you to imagine that situation where in every 3 minutes a child is dying because of toxic air, some form of toxic air. And also imagine a country where more than 1 million species, 1 million species have vanished. This is something very massive, right? 1 million species, not 1 million people, not 1 million birds. I'm not talking about that, or parrots. I'm talking about 1 million species. Imagine a world like that. And finally, imagine in a world where every single minute which we have spent somewhere around 30 minutes, every single minute, we are losing somewhere around 40 football fields of forest, right? I want you to imagine this, and I want at least 2 or 3 people to tell me one thing. The first thing is, do you really want to be a part of that world? And if at all you are part of this world, if you've imagined it in the couple of minutes I have actually shared, uh, could you tell me how will you feel if you are actually living in that world? 2 or 3 people. I hope my question is clear. Yeah, Nazia is saying that it is a horrific imagination. That is probably something, exactly. Too scary. Right. Anybody else? Anybody else? If anybody can talk, just one is fine, because 2 people have already texted. If anyone can, Abdul, can anyone unmute themselves and talk, or they can raise their hand?
Yeah, sure. Can someone?
Yeah. Very quickly. But keep imagining, keep reading these figures which are put, and try to imagine that world. Okay, I'll suffice with what since nobody's speaking, I'll suffice with what Nazia and the other person has said, that it is scary, right? And I believe the emotions are mutual. Or yeah, Hassan would like to go ahead. Faisal bhai.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam, Hassan bhai.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Hassan bhai. Please go ahead.
जी सर, क्या मैं हिंदी में बात कर सकता हूँ?
Please.
जी सर, अगर हम जैसे कि आपने इमेजिनेशन में बताया कि हम 2.2 बिलियन की जितनी भी पीपल हैं, अगर हम एक्सेस नहीं मिलेगा हमें वाटर को, क्लीनिंग वाटर का, तो हमें कितनी परेशानी हो सकती है। इस पे खास तौर से हमारी अपनी गवर्नमेंट, और गवर्नमेंट से ज्यादा हमें खुद इस चीजों का ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा कि हम अपने पानी को वेस्ट ना करें। जैसे हम अपनी टैप्स ओपन छोड़ देते हैं, अगर नल चला रहे हैं तो नल पे बाल्टी हमने भरी, वो पानी अपना छोड़ दिया। तो जितनी भी हम चीजें हैं, पहले अपने आप को कंट्रोल करना बहुत जरूरी है। हमें हमें माइनस पॉइंट पे अपने ध्यान देना बहुत जरूरी है, जिससे हम इमेजिनेशन के ऊपर वाले पॉइंट को बिल्कुल रोक सकते हैं। अगर ध्यान दे तो हमारे घर में लेडीज, बच्चे ज्यादातर जो है बाथ टब्स को एंजॉय करते हैं। हालांकि हम लोग जो है स्विमिंग पूल्स वगैरह में भी काफी पानी का वेस्टेज कर देते हैं। 2.2 बिलियन के लगभग जो है लोग हैं, अगर वो पानी के लिए समाप्ति नहीं मिलेगी उन्हें, तो कितनी परेशानी हो सकती है। इसकी जैसे कि सेकंड पॉइंट है कि हर तीसरे मिनट में इंडिया के अंदर एक चाइल्ड जो है वो टॉक्सिक हवा की वजह से मर जाता है। तो इससे भी शायद ये काउंट जो है एक एस्टिमेटेड है, इससे भी ज्यादा हो सकता है ये, क्योंकि इतना पॉल्यूशन है कि हद से ज्यादा। हम इस पे शायद जो है वो कंट्रोल लगा सकते हैं। अगर कुछ आपके पास सर टिप्स हो अब्दुल सर, तो आप हमें बेहतर गाइड कर सकते हैं कि हम किस तरीके से इन चीजों को रोक सकते हैं।
जी, जज़ाकल्लाह हसन भाई। आई एम रियली थैंकफुल कि आपने हम लोगों के सामने आपका जो इमेजिनेशन है एंड आपका जो कंसर्न है कि कंसर्न ऑफ हाउ डू यू एक्चुअली स्टॉप दिस, आपने हमारे सामने रखा। आई एम रियली थैंकफुल.
Thank you so much.
Like Hassan bhai said, like Nazia said, and like another person said, it is a very scary world, and the reality is that we are actually living in this world right now. This is not some dystopian movie. This is not Blade Runner 2047 or 2049. This is not some dystopian world. This is the reality in which we are living right now. A world in which more than 2.2 billion people do not have access to clean drinking water. This is the reality. This is the world in which we are living, right? The world in which we are living in India, the country in which we're living, every 3 minutes, like Hassan Bhai said, this is a rough estimate. This could be more than this, right? That
Yes,
every
sir.
3 minutes a child is dying in India because of toxic air. 1 million species in the world right now is threatened with extinction, and we need to understand this is what we have been able to locate as species. There are millions of species which still we do not know them, right? And every single day, every single second, there are species which are going extinct, right? And it is being estimated that more than 1.2 billion people in the world are going to be climate refugees by 2050. Imagine a world in which the kind of world in which we are living right now, where citizenship is become a question, right? Anti-migrant policies have become something which is very common. There are talks of building walls. There are talks of coming out of unions, right? There is ultra hyper nationalism on one end, and on the other end, we are seeing that there will be around 1.2 billion climate refugees in the coming future, right? And it is a fact that every single minute as we are speaking, we can see that it is equivalent to 40 football fields. I don't know how many of you actually visited a real football field, as in the football field in which FIFA is played. Imagine that, right? It is huge, it is humongous, and every minute an equivalent of 40 football fields is being raised to ground, right? For lots and lots of other things. So this is the world in which we are living, right? We are living in the era of environmental degradation at a massive scale. And this is not something, as I told you, this is not something which is the future. This is right now. This is right now. What we can see is that, second. Yeah, we are witnessing environmental degradation in every sphere, not just on land, not on sea, in forest, and with water, with biodiversity, with ecosystem, with air, with climate, with waste, with food, with health. Every single sphere of environment is being degraded, right? So this is something which we need to experience, because unless and until this experience, this idea, we do not internalize what is happening, the rest of my talk isn't going to be anything other than just an intellectual exercise, right? I want it to be an emotional experience which we go by, right? So this is the first thing. So the question in itself is, what we need to ask is that, do we really call this as climate change, or should we, as a lot of people have been talking about, as climate crisis, right? Like Afzal Bhai is saying, okay, there are a lot of people who have been saying, okay, this is no longer climate change. This is no longer environmental pollution or environmental degradation. We are in the face of climate crisis. We are in the face of environmental crisis. A humanitarian crisis is what we are actually witnessing, right? So this is the first thing. Okay, and now a little bit of science so that we can understand the different dimensions of what climate
Hi,
change is
Sim.
all
Sorry
about.
to interrupt. Your
And
voice
one
is
thing,
breaking for me. Is it same for everyone?
No, it's clear to
No, it's
us.
clear.
Maybe there's
No, it's
issue
clear.
with you.
right. Thank you so much, and I'm extremely sorry if my voice is not audible. Yes. So again, when we're talking about climate change or climate crisis, should we actually call it? We should start calling it as climate crisis. The first thing we need to understand is climate crisis or climate change is just one part of the larger environmental degradation which we are actually witnessing, right? This is one thing which I want to put across and then move ahead and just talk about climate change. But this caveat is also important that environmental degradation is something much bigger, much vaster than what you can see in this presentation, right? So it is not extensive. This is just related to climate crisis, but we also need to understand that there is something which is much bigger, which is environmental degradation, right? So I'll not go into the science of climate change or climate crisis, but still I'll just give you a simple example of it and then go ahead. Basically, what is climate change is? It is basically about the extremities in weather, extremities in climate, right? It is not that the world's climate is not changing. Throughout the human history or throughout the history of Earth, we have always seen that the climate is changing. Climate always changes, right? But for change of climate, the time duration, the time scale which it takes is the duration of millions of years. And why we are specifically calling this time in which we are living as climate change or climate crisis is because the change, one thing, is not due to natural circumstances. Because before whatever climate change or catastrophes or crisis which has happened, that is because of natural phenomena. That was a natural phenomenon, right? So the first difference in climate change or climate crisis, what we see right now, is that it is not natural. It is not because of natural phenomena. This is purely or extensively because of human action. And that's why there are a lot of scientists which are actually calling this as the era of Anthropocene, the era in which human action is responsible for climate change, right? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, obviously, the climate always changes. But what has happened is the conventional change of climate, what we've seen earlier, is not happening right now. We are seeing something called as climate extremities. On one end, we are seeing something called as flash floods. The rain, which is supposed to occur in 1 month or 2 months, is happening in a day or two, right? That's the first thing. And the second extreme is that we are seeing that an area which had sufficient amount of rain is now droughted, right? I come to that, right? I'll just move forward and I'll tell you what I'm trying to say. If we can look at, yeah, exactly, Khatija. It changes very frequently and it changes extremely, right? Extremity is something which is important. The extremity of change of climate is something which we need to understand when you're talking about climate change, right? I've just given a track of how do you look at climate change. And if there are some deniers, you can actually look at this and you can actually explain to me what else will you call this, right? I'm just talking about Indian context, but I will put across some slides in the later slides. I'll tell you what is happening globally as well. In 2013, what I witnessed personally for the first time is that in Uttarakhand, we saw that the rainfall was, just listen to this, right? 847% times more rainfall than what normally occurred, right? That happened in 2013 in Uttarakhand, and more than 4,000 people have died in Uttarakhand in 2013, right? And in the next year, what happened in Kashmir? In the next year, what happened in Chennai, right? I had my friends in Chennai. Obviously, I had my friends in Kashmir as well. I have listened to those stories. And I will request you people to listen to those stories so that you can understand the gravity of situation. Because most of the times we live in, yes, Mohammed, in Hyderabad as well in 2019, it was very horrible, right? And we also have to talk about why is this happening in cities as well, right? What you see, the drought which was hit in India in 2015 and 16, 330 million people were actually affected by it. What happened in Mumbai, what happened in Kerala, what happened in Vadodara, in Assam, right? I've personally been part of the programs where we have raised money for that, right? I've not changed the pictures, but if you remember, in Canada there was something called as wet bulb effect. If you remember, in just 5 days we saw 569 people dying. And you know how the people died? If you look at the sports, they were just standing, right? They're not doing anything. They're just standing and suddenly they're gone. They're dead, right? This is called as wet bulb temperature because of wet bulb effect, right? It's just like pressure cooker. The heat, it just sunk in to the earth, and we saw the catastrophe which happened. And who can forget? And Abdullah could actually tell us better about the floods which happened in Pakistan, right? More than 33 million people. I'm telling you, these numbers, 33 million, are 33 million lives. These are 33 million stories, right? We need to imagine it in that sense. And what is happening, like Afzal was actually mentioning, UN has declared that this June, which happened recently in 2023, was one of the hottest June which ever recorded, right? This is just one example, one facet of climate change, okay? The extremities of weather, okay? And the second thing, I will go very quickly into it. Again, as I told you, this is just for us to experience and understand the gravity of situation. Just 2-3 points in each topic, and I'll move forward. If you people are getting bored, if you people are about to sleep, if you have any questions, you can intervene so that we can make it more effective, right? Okay. Do I have a thumbs up till now? Any, just one thumbs up is fine for me.
All the situations that you have expressed till now are unimaginable, and we are actually living in that. So it is equally like challenging for us to listen to the data that you have presented today.
Yeah, exactly. And when you start, like I told you, okay, it is not 33 million people, it is 33 million lives. It is 33 million individuals who have their own stories to tell, their own dreams, who might like me wanted to study in Germany or wanted to do their master's, PhD, right? Sorry, not able to hear you. Okay, I'll move ahead. And when we talk about climate change, there is also something called heat waves. What we need to understand in an Indian context, this is also probably we can talk about it some other time, but there is a debate called as the debate of global north and global south, that the impact of climate change, what we are facing right now, is actually something did by a couple of people, but the brunt of it is going to be faced by people of global south. And it is said that the people who are the scariest part of this, or the most sorry part of this entire crisis of climate change, is that, or environmental degradation, is that the people who are least, what can you say, least responsible for this to happen in the first place, are the people who are going to suffer the most in the crisis of climate change, right? And this is the data which is actually presented to you. Heat waves in India has become very frequent, very common, and it is being said that 93% of Indians are going to be impacted by heat waves, right? Similarly, we have a phenomena which is called as the melting of ice caps. Again, this is not something which is very picturesque, where we see that the polar bears are dying or the glaciers are melting. It's not just that. The ice caps are supposed to be they were like the refrigerators of this planet. The temperature of this planet was actually maintained by those ice caps. And each year, we are witnessing that these ice caps are melting. And what will end up happening is one thing, it will help in rising, not help is not the right word, but still it will help in increasing the sea level. And that's why it will indeed can be connected to the cyclones, right? That is one thing. But the second thing, and the more scarier thing, is that there is something called a permafrost thawing, right? I want you people to go and Google it after obviously after this session. Permafrost thawing, what basically happens is there are millions and millions of species, microbes, and pathogens which are locked in our ice caps, in our glaciers. And each year, as this ice is melting, we are seeing new pathogens which are actually coming out. And COVID was just the beginning of it. I'm not saying that COVID happened because of that, but we will all start witnessing similar kinds of pathogens, microbes coming out. And this recently happened in, yes, Mohan, so very drastic condition, and we need to avoid it. Yes. So melting of ice caps is also very scary. This is not something which is picturesque, but something which have to be cried upon. Or like what we see the beginning of the Greenpeace movement, where those people just went into the sea and they started protecting the whales. This is something huge in that way, right? Melting of ice caps. All right. Yeah. Yeah. The next is, as I've already told you, sea level rise. What happens if the sea level rises? Nothing, right? There's just some water coming in. No, it's not just that. The two things happen. One is because of the glaciers melting, sea level will rise. And when the temperature increases because of global warming, the water starts expanding. And if the sea level starts rising, even a single mm or 3 mm, you will see that there are islands. I'll give an example. There is something called as Marshall Islands. It's a country, and that country is submerging. And it is being predicted. All our efforts, we want to go to Bombay, we want to go to Kolkata, we want to go to Miami, we want to go to New York. Let me tell you, by 2050s, you will no longer have those cities. They will be completely submerged by the rate of climate change or the global warming which is happening, right? And again, coastal areas are where you have enormous people who are connected to livelihood. It is not just the urban people, it is the fisherman community, which will be impacted by the sea level rise. And also the stronger the cyclones become, the weaker the monsoons will. And in turn, it will actually affect the farmers and the monsoon in India. And at the end, what will we eat? Probably tablets, right? Which the space people eat, probably will have to eat that. Forest fires, right? I don't have to say anything much about forest fires. You've seen that, you've witnessed that, right? I'll just tell you, catching fire, we know that they are the lungs of Earth and it will be problem. But what will also happen is that they are massive spaces where carbon's CO2 is actually locked. And when forest fire happens, like what happened in Greece and what happened in Brazil and what is happening elsewhere, it is still going to emit carbon which was locked in those trees, right? Which was locked in those soils. And let me tell you one more technical term, which is called as climate tipping points. Climate tipping points is something which, when the world starts reaching those tipping points, it is a circulatory model where things will start collapsing, right? An example of that, ice caps are melting, right? What will happen is it will lead to global warming. Global warming will again lead to melting of ice caps further, and again global warming. So when the world reaches climate tipping points, we see that the entire ecosystems are going to get collapsed, right? Coral bleaching is one more, which I personally want you people to understand, because we don't know what happens in marine life. We don't understand the importance of marine ecosystem for us personally as well, because more than 60 to 70% of the oxygen is not taken by trees; it is actually taken by ocean. And day by day, the ocean is becoming something called as ocean acid. There is a phenomena which is called as ocean acidification. And when the ocean starts acidifying, we have this this system which is called as coral reef, right? Coral reefs are basically the maternity ward of the marine ecosystem. And when the corals start bleaching, right? Basically, it's dying. When they start dying, we see that the entire marine ecosystem is going to collapse, right? And we are very much connected to that marine ecosystem as well. So coral bleaching, I would suggest you one of the documentaries in Netflix is Chasing Corals. To look at those documentaries to better understand what it is. So I'll come to the point which I was trying to make. All these things which I've told you is to bring about this particular point, that climate change or environmental degradation is not just a scientific phenomenon. It is very much connected to the idea of social justice. As I've told you, 1.2 billion people are going to become climate refugees, right? It is a question of world in which we are living, right? It is a question of morality. It is a question of ethics. Don't other species have the right to live in this world? Are we the only people who have right to live? Or only those people who have money, who have the resources, or those people only the ones who are have the right to live? These are some of the questions which come in front of us when you're talking about climate change, climate crisis, or environmental degradation, right? It is very much an issue of social justice. It is a very much issue of intergenerational justice, right? It is a question of well-being. It is a question of morality. It is a question of culture. It is the question of ethics, right? I'll stop here, and I want a couple of people, one person to express something, what you've heard, any inputs you want to make, or any changes in the presentation I'm making. Because I've already told you, if you want to understand climate change, these things are very important.
I really wish to say here, sir, that whatever you have said so far is quite depressing for me. In what world are we living, and where are we heading to?
Yeah, there is a word for this as well. I'm not remembering. I don't know if others know that word. Climate depression or something. I don't know that word. I'll tell you by the end of this session, right? Yeah, obviously, yes, it is very depressing. Okay, that was my first. Others can also express anything if they want to write something, they can write. This is the first part of my talk of climate change, right? What exactly does climate change mean? What are the different dimensions of climate change? And to better understand this, as I've told you, this is not just a scientific phenomenon. This is an issue of social justice, intergenerational justice, of morality, of culture, of ethics, right? I want to tell you by explaining to you just a point each of how it is being, how climate change is impacting us, right? The first point, massive migrations, I've already told you, right? What happened in Assam? This we can see, millions of people lost their homes. Mr. Abdullah can also tell us what happened in Pakistan, how people were. I just imagine sometimes, okay, what will happen if my home, for me, my home is very important, right? Because none of my brother and my sister, they're both abroad. And they always tell me to sell the house and shift to a better locality. But for me, that house is not something, yeah, climate anxiety, right? That's the word. For me, that house is not just a house of concrete, right? That has emotions, that has nostalgia, that has a lot of feelings. So imagine those people who are being migrated because of climate change, are pushed to come out of their homes. How do they even imagine their life? Or how many generations will it take for those people to actually come to the stage where we call it the stage of normalcy or whatever, right? That's the first impact of climate change. Second, submerging cities, I've already told you, right? Civil wars, right? We know about Syria, right? We know about what is happening in Syria, but what we don't know about Syria is that one of the reasons why the civil war in Syria started in the first place is because those areas and villages of Syria, we saw a massive drought, which is never seen in human history, and at least in the recorded history, right? People had to shift to cities. And we see that there was a lot of anxiety that government wasn't doing anything about it. And obviously, then there was also politics. Nobody's denying that. But it is a risk multiplier, right? civil wars is something which is imminent. I can give an example of my state, Karnataka. What happened in Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, for the water sharing, right? We see there is a very tense, sometimes environment when we talk about water sharing. And in the coming years, we are seeing those civil wars. We are seeing that intra-country wars as well, by what China is doing with Tibet and with India, right? With massive dams which they are building. But the point I'm trying to make is it is going to lead to civil wars as well. What we've seen in a lot of movies as well. There's one Netflix series, Lila, if you can see that, the dystopian world which they were leaving. They were fighting for water. They were fighting for clean air, right? So we also have something called as water crisis. You Google what happened in 2015 in Cape Town, right? There's something called as day zero. Day zero is a phenomena in which a city runs out of fresh water, runs out of water even to survive, right? And this happened in Cape Town in 2015. And Niti Aayog, in an Indian context, it is saying that in the next 20 to 30 years, probably in 20 years, the major cities like Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, they are also going to witness something called as day zero. Irfan Bhai is saying my voice is not audible. Is it just for him?
No, the
It's
voice is
audible.
clearly audible.
Yeah,
It's
thank you,
possible.
sir. Yeah. Because it's really scary because what happens is I'm saying so many things and yes, Afzal bhai, last year, Chennai. Yeah. This is exactly what happened in Chennai as well. Probably they were paying 10,000 rupees. I'm not sure, but if I recall, 10,000 rupees for one water tank, right? For one water tank of water, they were paying 10,000 rupees. This is what is climate change for you. Food security, right? In a world where we have billions and millions of people who are undernourished, malnourished. And let me tell you, even we think we are having good food. No, we are not. Because there is something called as hidden hunger, right? It means that we are just eating one pattern of food, right? We are a generation who are suffering from something called hidden hunger. That is, we are not getting the kind of nutrients, the kind of organic food. We're just getting pesticides. We're just, let me not talk about it. It's a different altogether world. It is a scary world. If I just touch the topic of food, we will have to discuss this sometime. We are discussing this in Parisar Samvad. It's a scary world. It's a scary world. What you see in your supermarket shelves, they are nothing but they are processed food, which are nothing but slow pills through which we can die better, right? Die slowly without knowing. And you have vector-borne diseases. As the global temperatures warm, we see that the microbes, they become more active, right? And COVID is one of the, I don't have to talk about it. You have seen what COVID does, right? So that's the gist of the second section. That the first section was what is climate change, and the second is about what are the impacts of climate change. I've seen a couple of times. Probably Mohan was actually telling me, we know it. Tell us about some action plans, right? Abdul bhai, you will have to tell me when to end, at least 5 to 7 minutes before of when I should end.
Yeah, sure. I just dropped the message on WhatsApp also.
Yeah, thank you. Because the problem with the faculty like me is that we can just go on for hours, not care about people, right? Okay. So let us talk about what we can. Yeah, even though the picture is very scary, we are a generation which is very anxious of these kind of things. We see it. At least, if not in India, at least we can see in the global north, in Europe, especially, you know the name of Greta Thunberg, right? There's a lot of anxiety. But I don't say there is, but I can't say there is hope. I wish to tell you people that people say there is hope. People say, obviously, and we are people who have to be hopeful. Yes, we have to be hopeful. But the solution which I'm telling you now, I'm not very hopeful about it. I'll tell you why in the end. because of what this entire phenomena is all about. I'll tell you the entire phenomena, how it is unfolding, what are the reasons for that. Then you can better understand why I'm saying this, that there is no hope. But still, that's on a side note, but we'll be hopeful and we'll tell you, I'll tell you that there are 3 levels in which we have to work. One is on an individual level, the second is on a collective level, and the third is on the policy intervention, right? Let us talk about, because this is very important, the entire discourse of environmental degradation or the climate activists, we see that there are 2 extremities. We should never go in any of those extremities. One is there are people who just talk about individual change, and then there are people who say that this is a very complex phenomena which cannot be solved by individual actions unless and until the people who are responsible for this are not held accountable. And they are the ones, the emitters, the bigger emitters, who have to change. It's not us. The line is somewhere in between, right? That is what Meezan is all about. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But yes, Khatija. It starts with awareness, right? And when I talk about awareness, what is awareness basically is that we need to understand the intensity of the crisis in which we are living. And when I talk about awareness in individual action, the first thing is awareness. What we need to understand is awareness, not just in in urban spaces, awareness in our rural cities, in rural places, in villages, awareness with our parents, awareness in our kids. It is we are just that everybody is aware about it. We have to go out in public and actually see the organizations in which we are working, the street in which we are living, how far our individuals aware about the intensity of this crisis. Because let me tell you, if you are truly aware, one of my mentors, he says that if you are truly aware, you will not a piece of chocolate, because the wrapper which the chocolate companies use, right? It doesn't get recycled. So that is the level of awareness we are talking about. Awareness translating into actions is important. Very well put, very well put. That is actually what it is. Yeah, we are a community which lives in 2 worlds, right? We are very hypocritical people. We are very hypocritical generation, right? We talk about climate change and we travel in mostly. I'm not saying obviously when I have to go to Germany, I'll have to use a plane, or if I have to go to US, I'll have to use plane. I'm not talking about that. But when I'm from one place to another, I am talking about climate change and I'm traveling by air, right? That is not awareness going into action. Exactly. Well put, Mohammed. Right. Yeah. There are a couple of things which I've put for awareness, but I'll do one thing. I'll share these documentaries. Yeah. Right. So these are a couple of books I've suggested. These are a couple of organizations which you will have to follow just for the sake of awareness. These are a couple of reports which you will have to read, right? I will share this PPT so that you people can understand better, right? The second thing on an individual level, what we have to do is we have to reduce our carbon footprints. Very quickly, the time is running out. I'll tell you, just like human footprint, right? There is also something called as carbon footprints. Okay, every single action which we do has a carbon footprint to it. And we need to start being aware of what our carbon footprints are. And we need to start reducing those carbon footprints as well, right? It is to do with our food, the kind of food we have, the kind of food which is wasted, and how food, again, as I told you, food is something which is very touchy for me. We will have to talk about it sometime, right? The clothes, I'll just give you wearing. It takes somewhere around 2,700 liters of water to be manufactured. That is roughly equivalent to 2.7 years of water being drunk by one person. Imagine this. I'll tell you once, right? One single cotton shirt to be manufactured, it takes 2,700 liters of water, which is roughly equivalent to 2.7 years of water which a single person drinks, right? This is what it needs to be done on an individual level. There are lot many other things. I've put it across. We'll talk about it some other time, right? And then there is something called as collective action. This is very much different from what we look at it, because the problem with the whole idea of nation state and the organizations which are working is that one thing is we think we are individuals and we have rights. And the second thing is we held the state responsible. Obviously, the state is responsible, but there is also one more domain, one more area, which is community, right? We need to start having some community initiatives where we can work on climate change and environmental degradation, right? I've put across eco clubs in schools and in colleges, in our massager, in our community centers. We need to do this. Waste management, local level, at district level, at city level, rainwater harvesting, right? I'll talk about it. I've given some suggestions. These are for you people, right? Yeah, forums, there are a lot of forums. We'll have to do this. Waste management. I'll just give you one example of waste management, right? That is what individual people are doing with waste management. There is one city in Karnataka, which is Mysore, right? It is said that Mysore segregates 93% of its waste, right? So this is very much possible, the waste management. And let me tell you, waste management is very important, because waste secretes something called as two things. One is called as leach, which is very toxic, and it goes into the water system, the groundwater, and the entire water becomes toxic. And the second is it emits something called as methane, which is much more scarier than CO2, right? So there are a couple of collective actions as well. Why I'm moving forward is because Afzal has told me that we do not have time, right? The last thing is policy interventions. What are policy interventions? Is that we need to understand that yes, we will be working on climate change, but we also need to understand that there are a lot of people who are already affected by climate change. Our farmers, the indigenous people who've been displaced, the migrant workers because of heat waves, right? They've been affected, and then there are climate refugees. This is a need which is very urgent, which needs to be addressed. And one of the things which people suggest is the idea of universal basic income. And the shift towards renewable energy. This is not tokenism, mere tokenism, which a lot of countries do, right? Shift towards renewable energy at various levels is something which is very important. And when you're talking about policy intervention, we need to understand the urban infrastructure in which we are living. It is contributing hugely to the problem of climate change and environmental degradation. The kind of transportation system, the kind of waste management, the kind of water treatment, or how the water is, more than 40% of the water which comes to our house leaks within the taps, within the pipes, 40% of it. Imagine this, right? So there is something called as carbon tax. There is one thing which we want to talk about, right? It is about nationalizing water resources, the groundwater. Because we feel कि हमने कोई जगह ले ली, हमने कोई जगह खरीद ली, right? तो हमको ये महसूस होता है कि हम ही उसके ओनर हैं, तो नीचे जमीन में हम गाड़ के पानी निकाल देंगे, जितना भी पानी निकाला जा रहा है वो निकालते रहें, right? This is something which is very scary. Okay. Yeah, this was the third part of my talk. That is about what we can do. There are a lot of things, as I told you, which can be done, but I'll not talk about it. I'll end here. I'll stop here. And I would want Afzal bhai to talk that if I have, do I have time, or we should stop here? There's one more section, but we can drop it anyways.
Yeah, maybe time is running fast.
Yes, Afzal bhai, or Subal. Yeah, Afzal bhai.
Yeah, maybe time is running very fast, so we will conclude the program.
Can I conclude for in the next 5 minutes?
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that's possible.
Yeah, sure. 3 minutes.
Wonderful, Abdul. Yes,
Yes.
Abdul. I'll finish it
Yes,
within
please.
5 minutes.
Continue,
Yes,
sir. It
Abdul.
is much more interesting, sir. Please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
And one more thing is, sir, what is mean by
Yeah.
carbon tax? Please explain.
Yes.
please.
I'll do one thing, sir. Can I talk about that in the question and
Yeah,
answer
okay,
section?
okay.
Wonderful, sir. Thank
Yeah,
you so
yeah.
much. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
Azul bhai, 5 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you tell me once the 5 minutes are done and I'll stop, right? Yeah. Now the most interesting section of this talk is, why is all this happening? This is the first question we need to talk about. We talked about what is happening, how it is happening, and how it could be stopped, or we think it could be stopped. But the first and fundamental question is, why is this happening? This is again my thesis, or what we as an organization, we as Parisar Samvad believe in. This is not necessarily that you all people have to advocate this or believe in this, but still listen out. My humble request is that listen to what we are trying to say. And if it does make sense, you have to start talking about it as well. The whole history of climate change or environmental degradation, if we want to trace it, it can be traced to 16th and 17th century, the era of what we call as European Renaissance, right? The era in which we witnessed something, a phenomena, which is called as the disenchantment of nature. The era in which the entire knowledge system or the world was secularized, right? Or desacralized. The era in which every other being, right? It was reduced to a commodity. It was reduced to, as the next point states, as something which is material, which is mechanistic, right? The nature was completely disenchanted. The nature was believed to be unlimited, and it was believed to be just a mere resource which could be used and thrown away. I'll use this word very carefully. There's one author, Syed Hossein Nasr. He says this statement. I'm using this in a very just to evoke some reactions. That is, the modern worldview or modernity looks at nature as a prostitute, right? Not as a wife, because a prostitute is where you just give money and you use it and you don't think about what is going to happen next, right? Again, I've used it very carefully just to evoke some strong reactions from you people. But this is what has happened. The disenchantment of nature is something we have to speak about as vocally as possible, right? Like what happened in Turkey when there was a military coup which happened, that all the masajid, all the community centers, right? They started speaking from their masajid, right? From loudspeakers. We need to speak about the disenchantment of nature. The second reason for all this crisis is the history of colonization. How the global north build this obnoxious narrative of a white man's burden, where he believed that we are on a civilizational mission and we'll go to different spaces, different places which are rich with natural resources, and we'll try to civilize them. And the kinds of horrific ethnic cleansing those people have done is something unimaginable. If you want to read about it, there are two books. One is by Amitav Ghosh, The Nutmeg's Curse, and the second is by a novel by Yagyasi, right? It's called as Homegoing. We have to read about it, right? And now in which we are living, like somebody said, awareness leading to action, the hypocrisy which we have in the ultra-consumeristic society. When we talk about climate change right now, we talk about negative carbon technology, carbon sequencing, or we talk about geoengineering. This basically, there's this problem with modernity is that we don't want to change our lifestyle. We are an ultra-consumeristic society in which we are trying to find solutions where we will live the way we want to live, and yet we want to solve this crisis, right? This is it. Probably there are a couple of other things as well which I want to talk about, but still, the crisis of modernity and how the nature has been disenchanted. And if you want to go back from this crisis, we at Parisar Samvad believe that we need to start going back to our tradition. We need to go back to the non-materialistic worldviews which were already there in Islam and Hinduism and in Christianity, in Chinese traditions, right? All those tradition societies where nature was considered as something divine or part of the cosmos, which had an intrinsic meaning to it, right? This is where we have to go towards. We talk about something called as Imarat and Ardh, where we are not talking about going into forest and leaving. We are basically talking about building a community which is very conscious about the social justice, about the balance of entire ecosystem, and also about intergenerational justice as well. I am deeply, deeply happy with what Al-Sharq was able to do with this webinar and the network they have, and for having given me this opportunity to convey a couple of words. And I'm sorry, there are a lot many things to talk about, guys. There are a lot many things to talk about, but this could just be the beginning of all these, right? I hope that if not anything, this was able to evoke some strong reactions to the world in which we're living. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the participants for having listened to what I had to say in the limited knowledge and the limited time I had. And a big shout out to Al-Sharq team for having invited me and for having given me this opportunity. I will be sharing the person, where Vedr Bhai has actually shared our page as well. You can follow us, you can write to us, and you can be part of the movement, both Al-Sharq and as well as Parisar Samvad. Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. I will be sharing the PPT. Sure.
Thank you so much, Abdul Suhaib sir. It was like highly engaging. And I remember when we were children, when we were at school, we used to make posters for save water and planting trees and not deforestation. Until now, we have reached the age where the problem has generated a lot.
Absolutely.
So thank you for highlighting all. Yeah, it was actually an eye-opening session. Thank you so much. So if anybody has any question, please feel free to ask any question. Anyone would like to share their experience or something?
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Suhaib. My question is like, despite of these many organizations on climate change, where we are lacking of doing so, anything you came across?
Yeah, very quickly. I call my Amitav Ghosh as my invisible mentor, or like one of my friends, Nihal Bhai, he calls him as Maulana, right? For me, he's a Maulana. He talks about this. The immediacy of this crisis of climate change cannot be solved in the paradigm of, and I believe in this, cannot be merely solved in the paradigm of nation state or in the secular worldview. I'm not commenting on what secularism is all about, or not saying anything, but still, what he says is the immediacy of this problem, if it has to be solved, there has to be people who are motivated by religion. Not just, I'm not talking about just Islam. I'm talking about every single tradition. If I go on talking about Hinduism and how it talks about Sarva Dharma, right? And how in that Dharma, the entire ecosystem is also comes into picture. Or when I talk about Christianity, when it talks about the idea, which we also have in Islam, about vicegerents, right? Religion can evoke such strong reactions through which, like Muhammad Bhai was actually saying, okay, it will lead people towards action, right? So we need to start engaging with religious communities, and we need to bring those people into forefront, because that is how people are going to change because of the immediacy of the problem. And the second thing is, unless and until we don't start questioning the entire knowledge structure, the crisis which modernity has actually created, and how we are looking at nature, merely through some policies or through some technologies, we cannot solve this problem. And there are a lot of people, there are a lot of billionaires who've already built bunkers where they want to live when this climate crisis is going to unfold, right? Yeah, Aslam bhai. And yes, Aslam bhai, I hope I've answered this question.
Yes, sir. There are two more questions. If you allow me, you can take them.
I'm not sure Al-Sharq will have to tell if we can allow.
We have one more question from somebody else about carbon tax. He was like asking in the middle of the session.
Yeah. I'll talk about that. Yeah.
It would be great if you can answer that question too.
Yeah. Or else I'll not be doing justice to the words I've already told. See, basically, carbon tax is about we start taxing the corporates for not just their products, but also the carbon intensive manufacturing which these people do, or the carbon footprints which these corporations, the multinational corporations, or any other corporations, they emit, right? We need to start taxing them for carbon as well. See, because we need to understand that this crisis is day by day, it is unfolding in ways in which we cannot even imagine. And unless and until we don't stop these people, right, by taxing these people, again, I'm not the one who's advocating it, but there are a lot of people who are advocating this as a policy so that it will help us become more sustainable, and they'll start reducing their carbon footprint, right? Basically, it is about taxing corporations for the carbon which they've emitted. This is what motor carbon taxing is.
Yeah.
Yes, Mohan sir, you were saying something. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Anybody, if anybody like to have a feedback, give a feedback.
Sir, what do you think? Which approach will make it faster to reach zero emission?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways in which we have to work, estimate. There's not one solution, because I was reading about EV, right? We have all this discussion about how we have to shift towards EV cars. There is a recent report which states that EV car manufacturing is more carbon intensive than the fossil fuel cars, right? But that doesn't mean that we should not shift towards EV. With the entire infrastructure, where we also have to help charge those batteries, EV cars, through renewable energy. We need to start shifting towards renewable. This is so. What they're basically saying is that there are multiple solutions to this problem. We have been seeing that community, the global north, is talking about how we have to start intervening. But what we are seeing is that the global south, where they are the people who are mostly affected by this crisis of climate change, they're not speaking up. We are seeing that the religious communities, and when I talk about religious communities, I'm talking about the bigger part of the world, right? Muslims, Hindus, and all other people, right? I'm not just talking about Islam, I'm talking about everybody who are religious in their way. They have to start interacting. Because we have lived in this world for more than thousands of years. And we see that a worldview which is so capitalistic, which is so consumeristic, which starts looking at technology in a way where technology is merely used as a tool through which we can take as much as possible from the nature, not understanding the dynamics or not understanding the intrinsic value which the mother nature has to offer, like what Hinduism talks about, right? Yeah, probably there are a lot of approaches which we have to follow, but we advocate that the religious communities have come forward as well.
Last question, but this is a very simple question. So what message you give to the policymakers? Any message?
Yeah, Aslam, I wasn't able to hear you.
What message will you give to the policymakers?
To what? To policymakers, just step aside probably that's one advice I'll give them. Step aside. Let the people who are genuinely interested in making this world a better place, let them do it. And probably sustainability. Again, this is again a very technical jargon, but sustainability is to be kept at the forefront of whenever we are talking about policy. Because why I told the policymakers have to step aside is what happened in Forest Amendment Bill 2023. The horrible nature of Forest Amendment Bill. Just the they changed the first section where they said, okay, we are more environmental conscious, and the entire bill is about trying to water down the Forest Amendment Bill, and that's why I said for the policymakers to step aside. Thank you, Abdul. Thank you, Subul, and thank you, Al-Sharq, for having given me this opportunity. In depth to having given me this opportunity. Thank you.
I have.
We have.
अब्दुल भाई आपकी आवाज शायद ऑडिबल नहीं है.
या मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
Yes, yes, sir.
या तो मैंने चैट बॉक्स में एक व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप का लिंक मेंशन किया है, वो आप सभी लोग जितने भी यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं वो ज्वाइन कर लें, तो उसमें हम लोग इसका पीडीएफ जो है पीपीटी का वो हम लोग इंशाल्लाह शेयर कर देंगे, और आगे भी जो भी हमारे इवेंट्स रहेंगे उससे आप लोग कनेक्ट रह सकेंगे इंशाल्लाह.
So okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Sumbul, go ahead.
Thank you, Mohan sir. Thank you so much for.
One more thing.
Kindly stay tuned, dear participants.
Share the PPT.
Yeah, the PPT will be shared in the group itself.
Yes, it will be shared.
We would like to have a concluding note by Ms. Shamaila.
All right, Jazakallah khair. And sir, thank you, really thank you for such a crucial and very insightful lecture. So you mentioned about the books, movies, and documentaries recommendations, and then you made us imagine some scary situations which were actually true facts, like lack of access to clean drinking water, child mortality rate, extinction of species, people being homeless, deforestation, and many more. Then you showed us environmental degradation fields, which is in the field of land, sea, forest, water, soil, biodiversity, ecosystem, etc. And of course, you made us know that it's no more climate change, it's actually a climate crisis. Then you showed us what extreme events have taken place due to climate crisis. You even showed us the timeline of the extremities of only a small part of this huge world. Definitely, we have much more of that. And then there's some adverse effects of melting of ice caps, like rise of sea levels and forest fires. We now know that it is